like to call to order the meeting of the Municipal Audit Committee, and Mr. Starr is the chair of the Audit Committee, and he is, in his absence, Ms. Domboski and I are members on behalf of the Assembly, and Ms. Domboski and I agreed that I would run this meeting. With that said, I'd like to do an introduction, and we can start with you, Mr. Chair.
George McNeilis, member of the committee.
Kate Geyer, member of the Audit Committee.
Tom Pink, member of the Audit Committee.
Paul Oldham, Anchorage Assembly.
Jennifer Johnston.
Bertie Hall. Tim Steele.
Bill Up. Dick Training.
Pete Peterson.
Elder Greg Jackson.
Amy Domboski.
Peter Rothman, Internal Audit.
Thank you. Thank
Mike Chapman, Internal Audit.
Oh, Shirley Nelson, Budget Advisory Chair.
Ron Heston, Purchasing Officer.
Nancy Lucero, Employee Relations.
And the purpose of this meeting, as I was told, is to talk about, number one, the Assembly approved a few days ago appropriating $200,000 to do an independent review of both Kronos and the SAP implementation. And for the record, Ms. Domboski and I have been talking and working with internal audit and also the purchasing director to come up with a scope of work so that we can move as fast as possible to have this review done. With that said, Ms. Domboski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering if we could have both of the auditors and Ron Hannon join us.
Please, please.
Give me a seat at the table.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I think that everybody has in their hand a draft scope of work that internal audit put together on our behalf, and I really appreciate you doing that for Pete and Mike. And if you want to take a moment to take a look at it, if anybody has any questions, I welcome those questions. Everybody has a copy, right? And keep in mind, it's just a draft. Ms. Domboski?
Madam Chair, would it be appropriate to ask internal audit just to summarize for Assembly members?
As a matter of fact, I think that's a really good idea. Mike, Pete, Ms. Domboski has suggested that you just summarize your draft, and I think that that's a really, really good idea. And then if there are any questions after your summary, then we'll take those. Thank you.
Summarize it. Sure. First couple bullets are just general language. What we're really looking at is down at the project status, where the project has been divided up into modules. You have a finance module, and you have human capital, and each one of these has individual subparts, which are listed below. What we've asked is that each one of these modules be indicated as not functional, partially functional, or fully functional, so that the Assembly has an idea of where do we stand on these modules? Are they completed or not completed or partially completed? And what percentage are we talking about as being completed? We then have internal controls, components. For the above modules, indicate if any of the components that were originally part of the project have been excluded or pulled or stripped now that we're a couple years down the road. And then we have a time management payroll part. Basically, determine if SAP is properly configured to interface with Kronos, and then a project management component and an action plan going forward.
Pete, did you want to make a comment?
Any comments?
No, I think
Okay. Any questions? Go ahead, Pete.
we kind of based this on a framework from the original SAP review for the project back in 2012, which was very comprehensive at that time. So we worked with Kate and looked at how they did it, and then we pulled things out that looked like should be done this time at a quicker time, and that's how we kind of patterned this after. So.
Thank you. Any questions? Well, if I may, after this meeting ends, Ms. Domboski and I both are going to meet with Ms. Gaillard to review this and get some other recommendations that she may have, so that we can have a document to present to the purchasing department, and they can do their due diligence, develop the RFP and put it on the street. And we'll develop a timeline, and we will inform the entire body of what the timeline is, so that you can understand the expectations. Mr. Honeman, did you have a comment?
Comment, question, I don't know if it's in within the scope or could be looked at. I would be interested in knowing, since we are perhaps, for lack of better terms, I don't know what the percentage is what percentage of the original project, where were we, and then what percentage are we beyond each of those, and I'm suspecting that's what's going to be spelled out, if you will, under each of these sub-modules or whatever. So I'd like to see, where we're at in perspective, so you can say, okay, well, we're twice the budget or 3 times the time period projection or whatever. And if that is at all possible, try to find out why. I mean, I know that seems extensive, but if we can get some bite-sized pieces. Where I'm really particularly concerned is, you guys may know this, but the Fire Department Training Center at one point was utilized almost extensively for SAP and Kronos implementation or project management and whatnot. And so, at what cost? And was there payments made at that time? So we can try to associate the cost and the dollar amounts as best we can, because normally the Fire Training Center would either rent the space out to another entity at a revenue cost for the department, and I'm sure that they had something in their budget to do that. So did SAP Kronos, did that actually replace that, that funding source for them by a certain cost? If you see what I'm getting at, I'm trying to figure out where we're at. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on every little thing, but I'd like to figure out why we're where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Raskin, you had a question, comment?
I have a little bit of concern about expanding the scope to now get into the internal costing. I understand from the mayor and from the assembly that this is a pretty fast-track project because we're holding things up when we do this. And I don't know if an outside consultant can come in there and analyze the things you talk about. They're very important, but I think it's almost beyond what originally was expressed.
Thank you. Ms. Garrett?
Sorry, Mr. Steele.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do, if I
I'm
may.
sorry, I didn't see your hand. And then Ms. Garrett. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Particularly important, of interest to me is the project management phase in terms of staffing levels, because we know that's an issue. And do we, the municipality, my interest is, do we, the municipality, have the appropriate numbers and the appropriate skills that are free to spend the appropriate time to do what's necessary for getting this up and running. And so I don't know if it's starting from the beginning and going through to get things done, or if there are things that could be done in tandem. But it seems to me if we need more people, if we need staff, we need to know that, and that's of particular importance to me.
Thank you. Still, Ms. Garrett?
So my concern about what we're going to do with the end product. And I think we've had 3 quality assessments done at the municipality so far, 3. We had QA, SAP QA, which was 3 days and resulted in a 77-page report on the design issues, and then several pages on project management. Then we had BV, quality assessment, and then we had a Peloton quality assessment, which also ended up in a 40 or 50-page document. The challenge that you have is not the ability of the assembly to go hire an audit, because you're capable of writing an RFP. You don't need us for that. We'll help you. But what you don't have, my observations in the last 5 weeks and listening to the work sessions for the last 2 years, The Assembly has no ongoing fiduciary oversight activity of this project. And I think something that you want to talk about and get really firm in is how, when you get this audit back, how are you going to make it not have the same shelf life that those other 3 projects have in the last 2 years had? They're in a binder in my office, and they're on a shelf. And it's very easy for a management audit of any type, particularly from an oversight agency or like the school board. The Muni once went in and audited the school district. You know, it became a great paperweight because the school district didn't want that audit, so they didn't participate. Well, we're not going to not participate with you. We will participate fully. But there's a great % chance that if we're not careful about how this is structured, it's going to become another one of those reports. So the conversation needs to be had as to, we already have a kind of a real detailed layout of an audit. And you have $200,000 here that you can have an audit to, and of course you can deny the audit that we have proposed. But you still don't have a way, when you're done with spending $200,000, of knowing and getting the reporting you need. So it occurred to me that perhaps you want to think about that as a fiduciary responsibility of an oversight agency, you hire your ongoing independent QA to take you through the rest of this project and give you the information that you haven't had all along, which is, you know, your obligation to the public to say, are they doing what they're supposed to do in the administration? Now, I don't want to stop you from having an audit if that's where your heart is, because that's not my job. But what I was hoping we could have a discussion, because I'm a member, not just a staff reporting to you, is what are we going to do afterwards? We have say the Assembly members passed the $750,000 audit, and this is already passed as well. Can't we work together? Now we have a lot of money that we together collectively should be able to turn into something that gives you the information and the oversight role and us the detailed schedule that we need to know what we have to do. 200,000 is not, with respect, is not going to give you the detailed information that we need to restart this project. I just don't think it will.
Okay, are you done?
I am.
Thank you. Just a comment before you go on. I mean, first off, we're not calling it an audit, but I guess if you pull out a dictionary, review, audit may very well mean the same thing, but we're calling it a review. And I really appreciated comments about having something done and letting it sit out there and get dust on it. That's not going to happen with this. Okay. What we're also going to be asking for is a recommendation.
Right.
And the recommendation is going to be, okay, where do we go from here in terms of using taxpayers' money? And that's the bottom line, the recommendation. We're not going to get a recommendation to just do nothing. And when we get a recommendation, we have to work with you, with the municipality, and discuss what the recommendation is, and then take it from there. Do you want to respond, or can I go to Mr. Horniman?
I just think the recommendation is going to be, you need a project plan, you need a new schedule. You need someone to look at this component and say, this is not designed properly. And then what? You know, what we need, what we have in the 750 is audit these modules and give us a project plan and a schedule. So, and I didn't want to spend that kind of money. I was afraid to bring it forward. But what I wanted was something so we never had to do this ever again. Together, we can get there. We can get an audit. If it's your audit, I'm cool with that. It's going to have to be more money. So maybe you take my 750 and you turn it into your 750. It doesn't matter to me.
That's not a bad idea.
And then there's the 200,000 on top that you say, okay, now we're hiring a third-party independent. I don't care if you don't want it to be SAP, hire someone else. and say, every day they're going to report, or every week they report to the oversight body as to how this is going. Because this project is critical to the AAA bond rating that the municipality carries. And so it's appropriate that the mayor and the assembly rise to the level of oversight. But the way this is being structured right now, my best advice to you is that we're not on a track of success the way we're going at this, on parallel paths. We must come together. And if you want the audit, I'm great with that. Let it be your audit. They can report to you. But we need the bigger audit, and we need you to be more involved on an oversight basis. Now, I'm really done.
That's okay. You can say whatever you want. And the whole idea is independent. Okay, just keep that in mind. Mr. Honeman and then Mr. Michaelis.
Well, I echo that, and I'm going to take just a few minutes if you don't mind, because there are some people that...
Mr. Honeman, you have probably a minute, that's it. Just kidding, go ahead.
When I came on the body in 2010, we were well working into some noted and substantially obvious problems at the port management. And this is the only thing I can liken it to, quite frankly, is what is perceived to me, and by many, as a failure of project management, or lack thereof. Whatever it is, failure of or lack of. And maybe it was because someone just didn't have an agreement, or maybe someone didn't have that scope or the direction. I don't know. And I'm just going to summarize here, but my understanding so far to date is that the municipality recognized that PeopleSoft was not being currently maintained, licenses updated, whatever. Time to go to a new direction. An ERP program was bid. SAP was one of the companies that came in or was looked at. I don't know who referred or how they got here, but SAP, I'm sure their representatives came in and said, we've got this project, it's really cool, and we can make it work. And by the way, you tell us what you want in it, and he will give you a price tag. Now, I'm just summarizing this for simplicity terms. The problem I've got, and I don't know how to differentiate, and I'm going to do it to our auditors what your comments were. 200,000 may not be enough to get that answer. 750,000 may not be enough. Maybe 950,000 or $1 million would. I'd like to know, much like I would like to know with the port, when we start looking and picking up rocks, people who are in charge or responsible for implementing get immediately defensive, and I understand it's human nature. They want to justify the direction they went or the decisions they made. I don't want to get to the point of having to single someone out and make a person that throw under the bus, whatever. I want to know why we're here, and more importantly, how do we get from here to there? Whether it be we scrub it and we go somewhere else, or do we finish it out with the direction tasking as you just briefly, adequately explained, very eloquently. And is it SAP who originally sold us a product? Or is it an independent person who I believe would be the best persons to say, I got no ties to Peloton Group. I've got no ties to this other group the Peloton Group was before. I've got no ties to SAP. We're aware of these people. Here's where you're at, and here's our suggestion. Here's what we think happened, why you're here, where you're at, and here's where we suggest you go. And it could be we scrub the project and look for something else. $30-some million into it. It'd be a shame to see the waste of money. But I don't want to see a port-like project where we are $100 million estimate, and now at the last I heard was closing on $1 billion, and that's with what we've spent and what we're going to have to spend to fix it. So I don't want to sit by as an assembly member and say we had an opportunity to find out why we got to where we were, only to be told, geez, if you do this, it's going to take us a little more time, and this isn't going to cut it. I don't want eyewash. I really don't want eyewash. I'm not interested in just somebody say, here's another piece of paper. That's all well and good, but that's not going to get us to the next step. So I close with those comments.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Michaelis?
Yeah, thank you. So my comments are kind of mixed from several things that I've heard. First of all, in looking through this, I do agree with Mr. Steele. I think we need to be a little bit more specific when we talk about human resources involved in this. We certainly have an element in here, but we haven't asked them to determine what the right number of people are to take us forward. Okay, that's specifically not in here. From my perspective, that's something I think we all probably want to know.
I appreciate that. But let me just say this, Mr. McKay, before you continue also. Keep in mind, this is just a really quick draft that
Right.
Mr. Raskin put together, so we can
Right,
have
so
a
we're just
conversation.
commenting on it right
Yeah,
now.
no, I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then the other thing too is, you know, where we are right now and how we got there, you know, there's all kinds of reasons. But I think what we need to really be doing right now is concentrating where the heck we are, and then what do we have to do to go forward and finish this project? Or if it's determined as a result of the audit or a review that it's not possible, then we start coming up with a plan for a workaround, whatever that is. Because we know we've got to have an ERP system. I think all of us agree to that. What that is, I don't know. I'm hoping it's this one because we do have an awful lot of human resource investment in it as well as money. But for this thing to be really an effective element for you and for the administration to be able to use, yes, we need to have them come in there and validate that what we're doing is right, that what we want to do is possible, and give us a plan in each one of these elements how to get there. That's what I think we need, just to validate. Because if we don't do that, we're going to be going right back to the same thing we got again. And I think that's the point that Kate was trying to make here, is that let's bring in the expert, whoever the experts are. Let's bring them in and let's have them at least give us a plan forward and make sure that we've got the right resources available and that it's going to work, okay? Now, whether it's SAP, I mean, you can make you know, a case for it to be SAP, a good case, but you could probably make a case as well, as long as they're capable of coming in and on a competitive basis like everybody else. That doesn't preclude SAP from competing. And then whatever committee it is that you form, evaluate it. Then if SAP is who you think gives us the best value, great. If they're not and somebody else can do it, you know, that's great. But I really think that we need to have something here that's going to help us get forward, go forward, as opposed to look at that, you know, it's all screwed up, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it may be screwed up. It may not be right now. We may be on the right path. But here's what we recommend you do in each one of these elements as a plan, a project plan to take us forward. That's my recommendation.
Before I go to Ms. Dombrowski, I just want to make a comment based on your recommendation, and I think your recommendation is a good one. For the record, nobody's intent was to ever look backwards and say and figure out, well, who screwed up, or how did this happen, or how come we're way behind. I mean, that's not the intent. We don't have money to do that, and that's not even necessary. Our intent is probably just the way you stated it, Mr. Michaelis. You know, are we doing the right thing now? If we're not, what do we need to do to make it right? You know, and so I really appreciate your comments, but I just want everybody to know, for the record, it's not about who messed up. You know, it's about let's get back on track and fix this so we can move on and have an ERP system that works both Kronos and SAP. Thank you. Mr. Boston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I echo a lot of the sentiments said by Ms. Gaillard and Mr. Michaelis and Mr. Honeman, because I think we're all pretty much on the same page. I mean, I would not recommend going back and trying to figure out how much certain department assets were gone to this project or how much revenues, because I think that is too broad of a scope. I think, what I want to do is problem spot. This is effectually where we're at. These are the mitigating factors, or these are the issues. Can we mitigate those factors? And if we can't, how do you go forward? And I think you're absolutely right. I think you have to have a recommendation of a plan of attack to go forward. And it may be there's a combination of both of the audits that have to occur, but from a legislative body, we have a responsibility to take that oversight role in an independent fashion. And that's why I felt this was important. But, and many of us have heard the comments about staffing. I think we're all tuned into the fact we're not sure that we have enough staff to bring us over the finish line. And that's one of the factors that I'm going to be watching for in this report to come out. Are they going to identify that as one of those bumps in the road? And what are the recommendations going to be? It might just be to validate the plan that the CFO has already put forward. That could be it. Say, yep, this is exactly what's going to get you there. But in order for me to keep spending money on the project, I have to be confident that's really the way to go. But the other thing that we kind of skirted around a little is the fact that SAP is obviously a multi-billion-dollar company. They obviously had some successes, but they've also had some major failures with, or challenges with their programs in other places, in which they've been in lawsuits in which they've had to pay out money because their product didn't do what the purchaser thought they could do. So we have to stand back and look at it and say, is this a product that basically we were oversold a bill of goods for? And if that's the case, if, you know, our hope is we can identify the issues, move forward, and successfully implement. That's what my hope is. But if that's not the case, we have to sit back and look at it from a litigation standpoint and say, were we sold a bill of goods? Or in fact, did we just hope for the best and accept it? I don't know what the answer to that is, but in my mind is way open. It's not about you did this wrong and, you know, I'm going to blame you, or, you know, you wasted this amount of money. It's not that. It's just literally what are the factors that we're looking at, and can we have a path forward? And so I think the comments of Mr. Michaelis are 100% ringing true in my ears. I think it's validating what a lot of us feel. Nobody wants this to be a nebulous, let's just start pointing fingers and not having a path. I mean, I want that. And no matter, you know, the commitment I make is whatever this comes back as, I'm not going to sit back and let it just rest on the shelf, because we can't do that. We have to have success in this project. And if this project's not going to be successful, we have to have a successful ERP project. So that's my commitment, and that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Hall?
Yes, Madam Chair. As you know, I was a no vote on 200,000. But from what I'm hearing today, the element that we missed all along is somewhat to what Ms. Goward has referred to as our own independent oversight. I think that's what we've been missing. If we use that money to do that, I could feel very positive about that expenditure. Very positive. And I would like us to think really hard about that. And as you pointed out, we got a lot of moving parts right now, Madam Chair. Let's just make sure we get those parts in the right sequence. But I think that's the one thing that we can do that can assure us success in this project, is an independent oversight that's reporting straight to the body.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Ms. Guyard, and then Mr. Trainee.
Just was going to ask permission to draw on the board and then listen while I draw, because I think this
Is that permanent marker, Kate?
All right, go for it. Mr. Trainee, you were next.
Okay, Mr. Gray Jackson, what I want to see is this be done by somebody that's a certified SAP planner, partner. They've got a designation as a partner. I want to make sure it's somebody that's certified, that knows SAP, because we're $30 million into this. And it can't be Black and Beach, and it cannot be Peloton, because Peloton's not a certified partner. The other company the Wade is involved in is, but not Peloton itself. And I want to have somebody outside of Black and Beach, which brought SAP to us unsuccessfully. So just I want somebody that's certified in SAP.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Horniman?
Thank you. I didn't hear my name. I wanted to just clarify when I was talking about use of the fire training center or what that might have cost. I'm not looking for going back and looking at every little, I guess, scintilla of anything. What I'm asking for is, I'm not sure that we captured the true cost that we're at. So a real old adage that I'm really concerned with is, much like with the tort, those who fail to study their history are doomed to repeat their failures in the future. So I'm asking that we at least glance and look. I don't want to, we've got, as Ms. Guyard said, we've already got 3 reports that say, hey, this is where we're at with the performance. There's some recommendations, hire a Peloton or a project manager. Things are going well. We'll do the red, yellow, green. Go live is this. We've missed all that. We've missed all that. And there's got to be a why. So I guess we need to know why on some areas in order to not doom to fail again. We need to know why.
Thank you, Mr. Horniman. Ms. Johnson?
Yes, the only, this is a good conversation. And I guess my only concern or my only wish is, as we go forward, all these pieces are put together and maybe the timeliness of the audits or the independent review are done in such a way that they complement each other. Because there's definitely some interest in getting an audit, a snapshot of where we're at, and what we can go live with and what we can't go live with, and where we're lacking in manpower. And I think that is your audit, and that is your that's a lot of the scope that was suggested to us on Tuesday night. That type of audit should be where we're going, how we're going forward, if we can go forward, and then the project management of that. Where your review is something that is, so as we appropriate money, we know that it's being appropriated wisely. And I just want to make sure that the review is done at a time that it wraps together with the audit. And so it doesn't come out, isn't before, it's not during, it's not after. It gives us a review of the whole status and how we appropriate money, when we appropriate money, and what we appropriate money for. Because, I mean, there's no secret, I want this program to go live. And I don't want anything holding it up, and I don't feel it's in the same status as the port. I do feel that it's probably at the 5%, and if you know anything about project management, it takes 80% of the resources to do the last 5% of a project. And that's where we're at. So I just want, I hope, I'm glad to hear that you're going to be working with Ms. Garrard and others to see if we can have something in front of the Assembly that gives us the review we need for confidence in appropriating money, but also gives us a snapshot so we know the best way forward. Because, sorry folks, you can't, I'm sorry, you can't scrap this. We're too far into it. And we all know that. No, but it's back to pencil and paper. So we all have to be on the same team of going forward. It's just how we do that.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And just one comment I'd like to make before I go. Ms. Peterson and then you and Ms. Dembowski. But anyway, as everybody knows, I asked a lot of questions, okay, to the administration. And the last round of questions came from both Mr. Trainee and I on revenues and utilities in regard to SAP. And I hope that you got an opportunity to read their response. Okay, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think the reason, my reason for joining with my two colleagues to sponsor this $200,000 review was because, well, number one, there was a $750,000 SAP was going to review itself item on, and we weren't sure whether the Assembly and ourselves were going to have total faith in the review that they were going to do. And that's why we decided it might be better to have an outside group take a look at where we are at this point in time. But what I would like to see in the end, when we're all through with this, is an action plan going forward. I think that's, if we can, whoever we consult with that reviews this project, if they can tell us where we are and what the next steps are to get to the goal line, I think then it would be money spent wisely.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Raskins?
What we gave you is a very preliminary scope of work. Well, what is not included in there is the deliverables that will follow once we figure out what we want them to do. So this was not intended to omit that. It just haven't got there yet.
Right, I appreciate that.
I'd also like to point out that the original review by SIP that resulted in that huge report cost us $168,000, that's all. And the current proposed contract is very similar to that one. So I think the $200,000 may be reasonable.
Thank you, Mr. Raskins. Mr. Bosky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the comments from everyone, and I just want to reassure my colleagues, not one time have I heard one person say they want to scrap this project. No one is saying that. I think everybody realizes the value in it, and we want to see the administration successful in this implementation. But we all take our responsibility very seriously when it comes to spending other people's money, and I think that's just where we're at. We're at $34.6 million now, and it's a lot of money, and we know there's been challenges, and we know people are stressed, including the administration. I'm sure they're frustrated. But my question was to Mr. Haddon. Ron, as you listened to the discussion today, we've talked about potential RFPs going out to bid. Are you comfortable with the fact that you understand what the Assembly is coming from? You understand moving forward the direction we're going in? Do you have any questions for us?
Ms. Dombrowski, through the chair. As everyone, I think, will understand, the critical part of any RFP or anything of this nature is the scope that's developed. So we have to spend the time with both the Assembly and the administration, as we're doing now, to develop an adequate scope to whatever contractor that we pick can in fact meet our end needs. And I'm comfortable with this discussion that we're on the right track. It's going to be a question of how well we articulate what it is we want in the scope, and I believe we can get there because the initial draft that we have, I think, is fairly close. There are some things we need to add to it that we've all discussed here. I hope that addresses your question.
And can I follow up? Please. And I guess that's where I'm going, and this is where I was going with my questions on Tuesday night. And during this process of developing the scope of work and articulating the deliverables and articulating all the things that are in an RFP, from what you're hearing, what you're seeing, are you comfortable in that you can essentially do your job and get out a successful RFP that will address the issues and concerns that you've heard from the Assembly and the administration?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Guyer and Mr. Fink?
I just wanted to clarify, because I heard a number of times at the meeting and I heard it again today, SAP auditing themselves. And the thing that confuses me is we bought the product from SAP. They're not doing the implementation. They're not doing anything that we're working with. We're not working with SAP Corp. They're the ones that know the software the best. We want them to come in and look at the implementation that BV and Peloton have been doing to tell us module by module a detailed roadmap to get these modules to work the way that we need it to work for the city. So they're not auditing themselves. They know the software. We need help with why isn't the implementation going well, so it is independent. I mean, the $200,000 that we're going to spend, we're not going to get anyone that knows the software better than SAP, and we're not going to get the detail that we need as a roadmap, because the last thing we got for $150,000 was just an overview PowerPoint, high-level project management needed, better communication. We don't need that detail. You guys might. That might be the reason that you're doing it. We're looking for detailed help, and that needs to come from, I believe, SAP, not unless we can find someone that knows SAP as well as they know their own product. But I see a complete independence between these two. So I'm struggling with SAP auditing themselves. SAP is not doing all implementation. Peloton is. They're not SAP.
Mr. Lasky, please.
I just respond. And where it's coming from is discussions with staff, discussions with other in the municipality that are concerned that the SAP product itself cannot do exactly what we were told it could do. That's the question. It's not necessarily about SAP. It's about, is SAP's product deficient? And when you have the product developer reviewing not just the implementation, but they come back and they tell you, oh yeah, everything's good, you just need to do this, this, and this. Are they really telling us the fact? And the conversation happened in one of our work sessions when I was asking, you know, well, what if you find that there is something inside of the program that doesn't work, or, you know, they would have to build a bridge or whatever. And then I asked, you know, well, who's responsible for that cost? They wouldn't answer, right? It's an unknown. So I understand absolutely what you're saying. But I think some of us are looking at it too, saying, we just want confidence to make sure that somebody else isn't going to come in and say, you know, SAP doesn't do that. It doesn't speak to Kronos, it doesn't speak to Telestaff, whatever that issue is.
Right.
That hasn't been mitigated. We just want to make sure that we have a clear, unbiased view of that issue, whatever it is. That's it.
Can I respond just really quickly to that?
No.
Okay.
Just kidding. Go ahead.
We're at the point right now where we're struggling to get through conversion in certain areas. So the people that are waiting to get the data, you know, the data and waiting to get it complete, know what we need, know what we're missing, know what we're looking for. So when SAP comes out, we're going to ask them very detailed questions. Why doesn't it do this? How can it do this? They're going to have to answer. And if the response is we can't, or that's an outside module, or it doesn't work, then we're going to know that, and we're going to say that we did get sold, you know, a bad bill of goods. But until we have the opportunity to go to the masters, the owners of the product, we don't know if it can be done or not. We need to be able to completely point blank ask them, because we know what we want and we know what we're looking for and we know what our glitches are. We just can't seem to find a solution. So I'm not sure if SAP did sell us a bad bill of goods. I'm not sure how you're going to get that for 100% positive by not going to SAP and asking them specifically.
Ms. Gard, are you going to talk about the beautiful...
When you feel it's appropriate, then.
Okay, because you were next, but Mr. Honeman was after. Should I
refer to Mr. Honeman always?
A quick question, which is, and I don't know.
What did I draw on the board?
No. Mr. Finks brought a good point. If we bought a product at a great expense from a company who assured us that it would do what we're asking of it, I'm thinking that it would be incumbent upon them to come back with their tech reps or somebody, and I'm quite confident that somewhere in the purchasing agreement we have that, where they can come in and tell us, hey, you're implementing it wrong. The product's going to do what it's going to do. You're implementing it wrong. And I don't see why the municipality would have to go to any great expense for them to come in and tell us why their product isn't working. I'm really confused as to why we have to spend $1 million to them or nearly for them to tell us, hey, by the way, we gave you everything you needed. We gave you a Cadillac. We need to get you how to drive it.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Ms. Geyer.
Permission? So what I've drawn is an ERP implementation map. And I think that when I saw this on the board, it was very helpful to me to understand kind of the more magnitude of what we're talking about. So what we started out with in this program was MOA requirements. Approximately 1 year was spent developing requirements for this effort. Those requirements, we then hired B&B. I put them in black. We then entrusted and hired B&D to translate those requirements into something called the blueprint. The blueprint is essential for the success of the SAP. It talks and works, interacts with the SAP code by, in a very detailed manner, the blueprint, like you would on an architect or on a house, the blueprint tells you how to configure and how to design the system. The blueprint was only this far complete when B&B left us, okay? Then we hired Peloton. And we said, to go back and do this blueprint it's kind of like a one-time deal. You get a blueprint period. So Peloton, appropriately, in my opinion, came in as a rescue company. And they said, we're going to not spend your money finishing this. We're going to do your business processes and create business process flows, and we're going to configure your system on this basis, because this took, I don't know, 6 to 8, 9 months to develop that blueprint. So then they start configuring this system, and this is, call it assets and general ledger and accounts payable and other. These are all the configuration. The configuration is the design of the system. And when you design a system, there are 6,500 or more tasks associated with configuring the system, okay? So it's a very detailed process. And SAP code, which works in this, when they say SAP works in thousands of places, we're talking about the SAP code. This code is like old code and new code and upgraded code, because this is a world-class code from a world-class company. And it's appropriate for a world-class city. If you configure this wrong, this configuration tells this code how to work, okay? It says, do this. And because this is all, it's not, I do configure this way, but accounts payable talks to general ledger, and then it talks to purchasing, and then it talks, and they all work together, and they all go in here, and they tell this code separate things. So if you mess up with your configuration right here, you've got a problem, you've then, because this is an integrated system, and that's what this city needs. We don't have that now. We have a financial management system, way different than an ERP, which is like this. You configure this wrong, you've got problems down here in purchasing. So this configuration tells this code what to do. MOA, there's a little part in here for MOA, because SAP doesn't want you to mess with its code because it knows how the code should work. And this code works a lot of places. But it might not work everywhere for MOA. So we get a little piece of this code to customize ourselves. And we may have to do that with payroll. Where SAP has been sued, they are the implementer. This guy and this guy. I don't think you'll ever find a place where they've been sued for their code. They were the implementer in a bad implementation. Payroll in California didn't work. Caused me great concern that payroll in Anchorage might not work. And what SAP promised was that they would bring, this is payroll, they would send someone up here for 3 or 4 weeks for free to look at that one component. And we're holding them to that. But there's all these other configurations because you've had what I would consider a challenged implementation. You've had 1 and then 2, and a blueprint that wasn't 100% complete because this guy let you down. You've had a challenged implementation, so you're not really sure how this is designed. Is it designed efficiently? So it goes into the code. You're also not sure about the testing. Peloton has told you, when we got here, we did our bid to you based on this blueprint being signed off in areas where it actually, where they tested it, they came in, they did 4 days worth of work, they gave you a bid, come to find out, they pushed a couple buttons and the code underneath it didn't work. So they had to start afresh, and they're on a fixed fee contract, right? Fixed period, fixed fee. And they showed their, I don't know, commitment, if you will, by redoing a whole bunch of stuff that B&B told us was done. So they've been a partner, and they've worked under cost some months. So we're not after Peloton. We're after, is this thing configured properly? Now, testing scripts. Okay, so you take a requisition and you create it, and then you process it into a purchase order, and then the guy does the services, and he sends you an invoice, and then you match that to invoice to the receipt. That's what testing is about. Is that process working? If your testing scripts are using I don't know, an industry term, crap, then you're not going to get good results. So you have to have somebody look at our testing scripts. And all of this goes back to here. Not that anybody did a bad job. Lucinda didn't do a bad job. The MOA staff didn't do a bad job. We had a bad implementer. Nobody doubts that. And so here we are, way out here 3 years later, and you want to have an audit. You want to have something that says, let's restart. 18 consultants, 2,200 hours. They are scrubbing data cleansing, they are scrubbing data from PeopleSoft, data mapping, data conversion, testing, our reports, our interfaces, our conversion program, and they're scrubbing our project management. 2,200 hours. That's what you're paying for, $750,000. The last one that the internal auditor talked about was $450, 3 days, 3 weeks. You need a restart. We need a restart. And the outcome of that is a project schedule, project footprint, new project management, which includes resources. And we've asked them for an estimated budget. So you know, when they're done, how much it's going to cost. But all of that being done, if you don't have oversight over us, if I leave, and George leaves, and everybody else leaves, it's up to you guys. We've got administration's changing no matter what we do in the middle of this conversion. We need your oversight, and we need your money to help us with that. And that, it doesn't have to be my way, but you need to figure out how you're going to accomplish this.
Any of Mr. Hall, but I have a comment to make really, really quick. I appreciate the description on board, Mr. Art, and you're right, oversight by the legislative branch of government. And that is what we're trying to do in terms of having an independent review. That's a start. So I just needed to make that comment. Mr. Hall and then Mr.
Yeah, very quickly, something suddenly dawned on me sitting here. Is it possible for us to get a breakdown of where the money has been spent, where it's been spent with? And I would love to see that.
If I can follow up, we have that.
Do we have it broken on what we paid SAP, what we paid Galactic?
We have that, yeah.
I don't recall seeing it myself.
And we've been given that actually at every single monthly work session. But anyway, Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, I'm not supportive of the audit you're proposing, haven't been. And the main reason is because, as far as I understand it, it doesn't do anything like what Ms. Gyard just described. Because that seems to be what we need, and we turned down the money to do that.
We didn't turn the money down.
The 750,
we did not.
tested the
Tested budget audit.
We deferred it to the audit committee.
Right.
But that's what I think we need to do. But it seems to me that a lot of what has taken place is largely, and with all due respect, Ms. Gyard, I think you're doing a great job, and that explanation was very helpful, I think. From my little vantage point over here, it seems like this whole thing really spun out of control when you came in to 2 meetings ago on the work session and kind of threw a bomb out there. And you said that you didn't even know that, yeah, I mean, you were, it looked like you were saying that everything that went on in the past was done wrong, and that I think you even mentioned in that work session that you didn't even know if this would work for our finances and stuff. And, yeah. Payroll. And that, I think, we were struggling along the whole time, just kind of thinking, oh, this thing is endless and it's going to be a problem. And that sort of hit us, and that is sort of the demarcation point between, where we were and the efforts to really get a handle on it. Because all of a sudden we felt like, oh, geez, this is worse than we thought, and we really have our responsibility, and we've got to do something like that. And I think it just kind of set a fire under us that may not have been that productive of a fire, because we didn't have, I believe, and different members here probably know much more about this than I do, but I don't think as a body we had sufficient knowledge about this implementation. I mean, I think there are people thinking SAP is doing this project. That's what you hear, those comments about them auditing themselves. And I know that the Peloton Q&A, I don't know how many people even read it. But I think when we have a lack of information or a lack of really good grounding on the project, and then we get sort of this is a big problem, we react just like legislative bodies do and say, okay, well, we need somebody else to come in and help us understand this. So I would just urge everybody to take a breath. And I think there is a good path laid out, and I think it involves having SAP do this audit. I think that's very important. I think for our comfort's sake, there certainly could be another audit that is more of an overall, how did we, what is wrong with this process thing that could take place. But I think it's very important now that we do those things and that we speed along this money instead of deferring it to get this thing going, because delay costs money too. Okay.
Mr. Trainey, thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Trainey?
On the other side of the question, Kate, it was good to see you walk in here, because we were being fed smoke and mirrors by both the last CFO and Lance. Numerous times they said, don't worry, it's going active on this day. It never happened. So I appreciate you coming in and telling us reality. We're like a car in neutral going downhill. We may get there, but we're not going to get where we want to go. So I appreciate you telling us what's really going on. So thank you, Kate.
Mr. Belsky and then Mr. Evans.
What I would say is I think there's been some very good comments here today. And from my perspective, as you're developing the RFP, I think one crucial point that should be included is what would it look like, or let's incorporate this legislative oversight person or this legislative oversight, or what measures, what would that look like? Does that make sense to you? Does that make sense?
I think Chair, I could draft what I think
is something that would be helpful and email it to you? Or to
Well,
give it to-
I would say, you
Because
CC
we're
me.
meeting in about 5
Yeah,
minutes.
CC me, that's fine, but to Ron and to our internal auditors, I think that that portion of oversight portion from the legislative body's perspective, like how would that manifest itself? If the recommendations would even come from that audit or that review. Does that make sense to you, Ron? You look confused.
Well, through the chair, Mr. Dombrowski, I'm not really confused. I'm trying to figure out, do you want, in addition to the scope, that when the audit is done, that you have a, I'll call them a third-party oversight person that monitors what the muni is doing, what the administration is doing, or do you want a finalized completion audit and then we incorporate the third party through another mechanism? I'm not sure
I
where
don't
your
know which
scope
way
is
would be,
going.
I don't know which way would be better, to be honest with you. I defer to,
It might take some further conversation.
yeah, I guess.
Well, thank you, Ms.
Not
Johnson.
as easy as maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Evans and then Mr. McCary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, take exception a bit to Mr. Trainey's characterization of the information we got from the CFO and from the IT director as being smoke and mirrors. And I seriously don't think that's the case. I think what everybody has to, they probably do understand, but what seems to cause the delay in all this, as far as I see it, and the missed go-live dates and added expense, and when I asked Wade from Peloton about that, it was the answer he gave me, and that's sort of what I've been going on, is that as, when Peloton did its initial Q&A, as you've seen, they identified certain problems with Black and Veatch and with certain things about going forward that had to be done. After that time, though, as they got into it, they started uncovering problems with the Black and Veatch implementation that were not disclosed or disclosed incorrectly. And that caused a bunch of things to fail and to have to be redone and reworked. And I don't think it was anybody giving, false information. It's things that were, embedded in bad workmanship, or whether in bad workmanship or incomplete workmanship, that caused that people were just dealing with. So I don't think there are anybody in black hats in this whole affair. I just think it's a very complex system that we had a bad implementation to start, and we're still working our way through that. So I just want to make that on record.
I'm going to allow Mr. Trainey to just raise his hand.
No, he can't. Get the last word.
Give me your hammer.
And then Mr. McCary.
I'll just remind the body who brought us Black and Veatch, our last CFO.
Okay. Are you done? Thank you, Mr. Trainey. Okay, Mr. McCary.
You may want to consider something that you had directed as a body, especially the Enterprise Committee, that there be a certain process and a time frame in which updates were giving to you for the two projects that I'm directly responsible for, and that's the ML&P project as well as the Ford project. As you may or may not know, there were specific things that was of interest to the Enterprise Committee, and we provided a straw man as to the things on the elements that was, in our opinion, the most important, that if you were an oversight body, you'd want to know. So the formats, the two different formats that we use, because the projects are executed a little bit differently, basically were vetted by the Enterprise Committee. And they are the key elements that, as an oversight body, you'd want to know about, and you'd want to know about it frequently. And so perhaps a way of ensuring that you're getting the information that you need in a timely manner so that you can keep track of where we are on this particular project, perhaps the mechanism you may want to use is something very similar to what the Enterprise Committee is using today.
And I'm sorry, are you?
No, I'm finished.
Okay, and let me just follow up, all right? This project, as everybody knows, has been since 2011, all right? And fortunately, maybe almost a year ago, I think, because this body asked for monthly meetings. We didn't have that before, we should have had it from the beginning, but, it is what it is. And we have been having monthly meetings because, at the request of this body. And maybe we need to be more specific in terms of what we want to see at those monthly meetings instead of a lot of color-coded stuff. And thank you, Ms. Geyer, because we did get a better presentation than we have been getting at our last monthly meeting. And with that said, does anybody else have any comments before we adjourn? Okay, meeting is adjourned.